Hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming along today to launch Life, Love and Marriage by Christine Forster. Can we have a big round of applause for Christine? I'd like to welcome everyone who's joining us online throughout Australia. Manjits for hosting us here today at this beautiful restaurant. Wilkinson Publishing and booktopia.com.au. Max wanted me to make sure everyone knows who's watching at home at the moment. You can buy this wonderful book through booktopia.com.au. If I could make special mention of Faye Abbott, who's joining us at the front of the room today. Faye, a big welcome to you. It's wonderful to see you. I just said to Faye, you run a family of high achievers, and that includes Faye, and I know that everyone is very proud of Christine's achievement in pulling this book together. Virginia, Christine's wife, welcome to you, Virginia. Lovely to see you here today. Should the former Prime Minister have come before all of that, I suppose, in the pecking order? Well, not today. No, Faye, good. Ladies and gentlemen, also please welcome the former Prime Minister of Australia, Mr. Tony Abbott. Look, two of my favourite things are on show here today, love and family. And there's something very special about the fact that these siblings have had a different point of view on the issue of same-sex marriage, but they share the same view on the importance of respecting someone else's opinion and also understanding that times change, things change, and when they do, we change too. And it's a beautiful relationship. I had Tony and Christine in the radio studio with me recently, and it was just great to watch the two of them because it reminds me in many ways of the relationship that I've got with my sister or my brother. There are many things we agree on, there are other things we don't agree on, but ultimately there's one thing we do agree on, and that is love. We love each other, and I really love watching you two in action, even though from time to time you can be just a little bit combative. And I'm looking at you, Tony, not Christine, although Christine, don't go crossing Christine. She knows how to hold herself. I'd like to officially welcome to the stage to launch Life, Love and Marriage by Christine Forster, the Honourable Tony Abbott.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks, everyone, particularly Manjits, for being open and for hosting this wonderful occasion. Look, some years ago I wrote that Liberals should write more books, and I'm delighted that my sister Chris has taken me up on that particular admonition. And of course, the very best books to write are the ones that have already been written, and that's exactly what we have here, a book which encapsulates Chris's public life by bringing together her speeches, her articles, her statements on a whole range of issues, obviously same-sex marriage, but much besides, particularly her work as a Sydney City councillor. Now, politics is not just a contest over position, or it shouldn't be just a contest over position. It shouldn't just be a battle of personalities. Politics should be a contest of ideas and actions, competing ideas and rival actions, because we learn and we grow through competition. We test ideas, we compare actions, and we try to assess them. And yet, unless it's written down, it's not nearly as well thought through as it should be. So many of us, if we're simply speaking extempore, will say things which the instant they've left our lips, we will think, well, actually, that's not quite what I meant, or that's a little bit more than I should have said. The beauty of doing it on paper is that you can cross it out and do it again before you finalise it. And that's why it's the written word or the spoken word based on a script, which is the distilled essence of our thinking. It best captures who we really are and what we really want to say. And the great thing about all of the speeches and all of the articles in this book is that they are absolutely the work of Christine Forster. None of that culture of the speechwriter, which is all too prevalent in our public life these days. These are the words, the thoughts, the aspirations, the dreams of the author, and that's as it should be. The other good thing about publishing this is that it's now preserved. So much that we say and do disappears into the ether. But once it's brought together in a book, it's there as permanently as anything in this transient world can be. I guess the other thing I should say is that while Chris and I disagree on one particular topic, there is only one topic in this book on which we would have disagreed. In every other respect, as I read this book, I see in my sister Chris an entirely orthodox mainstream Liberal. I see in my sister Chris someone who is an exemplary representative of the broad centre-right of Australian politics. You read this book and Chris's prescriptions and ideas for this, our greatest city. She wants lower taxes, she wants less regulation, and she wants more personal responsibility. Absolutely the ideas which should animate Liberal Conservative representatives everywhere, and particularly in all levels of government. It's good that local government is receiving more attention thanks to this book. I doubt that there are too many books. Certainly I doubt that there have been too many recent books that have focused on local government the way this one has. And let me finish on this note. I don't know what's likely to happen in the next local government election, but I do know that if Chris were ever to be our Lord Mayor, this city would be much more open for business than it has been. And being more open for business means more jobs and more prosperity. And if there's one thing all of us should be working towards, particularly in the face of the greatest economic slump in 80 years, it is more jobs, more prosperity, and that's exactly what you would get from a Lord Mayor, Christine Forster.
Sounds like he's started off the next campaign, which is fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. Abbott. I've known Tony for longer than I've known Christine, but in the last 10 years that I've been hosting a radio show on 2GB, I've had many, many occasions when I've spoken to Christine and got to know Christine really well and admired her ability to break down an argument, to communicate a message and not be afraid of taking on tough issues. And there have been times when I've tried to put a bit of pressure on Christine to say, well, I can remember when Malcolm Turnbull, for example, was no longer the member for Wentworth and there was Liberal pre-selection happening there. And I don't know whether you remember this, Christine, but I ran a bit of a campaign to say, Christine, come on. I mean, you need to have a crack at Wentworth. And I don't know whether it'll be as the Lord Mayor of Sydney or the Premier of New South Wales or the Prime Minister of Australia one day, but we can all just sit back and watch what happens next with Christine Forster. Can I please introduce to you right now the author of Life, Love and Marriage, Christine Forster.
Thanks, Ben. And thank you to Manjits again for hosting us here today. Look, I didn't want to make a speech about a book of speeches, but I've got some people here that I really want to thank. It's been absolutely wonderful to have Ben's support launching this book. Ben and I have known each other since 2012, when he, out of the blue, started texting me messages of encouragement when I was starting out on my first campaign for Sydney Council. And I was so chuffed to be hearing from him like that, despite the fact that at the time he was merely an afternoon show radio host. But he was already a hero of mine, and yet now here we are nearly 8 years later, and I still feel like I'm just getting started, and Ben's the king of the airwaves. But we've had lots of chats, him and I, in the time since then. He once had a crack at me for having a go at the Lord Mayor for installing $600 cycle tyre pumps next to the bike lanes in Sydney, when you could get a $12 version of one at the bike shop across the road. So he's pushed me a couple of times, not just on Wentworth, and made me justify a few of my positions in council. Of course, we had a lot of discussion through the marriage equality debate, in which Ben was a great supporter of the position I was taking, not such a great supporter of the position Tony took. But we've also chatted an awful lot about the things that are important to the council and to this great city. And that's mostly been because Ben, like me, really cares about Sydney. He genuinely does. And can I really thank you for that, my friend, because your voice, particularly now your voice in the new role that you've got at 2GB, is going to be really important to the future of this city for decades to come. Look, the City of Sydney is truly Australia's global city. It's a $130 billion economy. It accounts for nearly a quarter of the state economic output and nearly 8% of gross domestic product. It is the engine room of our economy. And without Sydney firing on all cylinders, Australia is not the place that it should be. We all lose. And it's particularly important, particularly as Sydney charts its post-COVID course, that we have honest champions like Ben, who will be leading in many ways the public, the commentators, the media, and state and federal governments and local government. They'll be listening to Ben's voice, and they'll really need you to be at your best, so no pressure there, mate. And to Tony, my brother, I have to disavow him of one thing. I voted for the Republic in 1999, so we've in the referendum. So we've disagreed on more than one thing over the years. Sorry to break that news to you, Tony. But thank you very much for being here today, and for the love. Yeah, I've matured. For the love and support and the occasional well-placed criticism that you've given me over the years. Thanks also for writing the foreword to this book of my speeches and articles. I'm really grateful that when I asked you to write it, you didn't have too much to do in your days, because I really think that if there was a genre for it, you've set the high bar for sibling-to-sibling critique. But for those of you who haven't read Tony's foreword, in his second paragraph, he quotes Billy Hughes's critique of Sir William Lyon's 1908 budget speech, which I'm sure we all remember, and the three things, no less, that were wrong with that speech. No doubt reflecting on some of the speeches that I've got in my book. But seriously, later he genuinely gives me some due, which I really appreciate, because it's a thoughtful and complimentary reflection on these efforts that I've put into this book, and you know the small things that his much younger sister has achieved. And it was really the logical choice for me to ask Tony to write the foreword to this book, because he's always been there for me as a political mentor, no matter what. And he was a central figure in the campaign for marriage equality, albeit from the other side of the fence from where I was sitting. Tony's always understood what I was trying to achieve in local government, which is, as he's articulated today, maximising opportunity for our people and businesses, ensuring the Lord Mayor is transparent and accountable and is working for our constituents, and efficiently providing services and infrastructure. In short, focusing on delivery, not ideology. That's where the political leadership of Sydney needs to be in a post-COVID world. but also because despite our obvious difference of opinion throughout the marriage equality campaign, I think he and I really managed to model what is a good way to conduct a public debate about social reform in Australia. Our opposing views were very clear to everybody. They played out in the public forum. But it was also really obvious that we were listening to each other, we respected each other's differences of opinions, and we acknowledged that the world would keep turning, whatever the outcome of that discussion happened to be, and that our relationship would be the same. And I think when I reflect back on that period of my life, I think that was one of the gave me some of the greatest satisfaction of that period, that I think Tony and I really modelled how families can differ but still remain respectful and hang together through the tough times. There are a few other people here who I'd like to thank. Shane Mallard at MLC, I saw before. He's a predecessor of mine on the City of Sydney. Shane spent 12 years as a councillor fighting solo against the Lord Mayor and the Greens. He's now in the upper house where we don't have a majority either. But from what he's doing in the upper house, I know that the 12 years he spent on Sydney Council is standing him in very good stead. Councillor Zach Miles, who's here, and I'm pretty reliably informed that Zach is not only the best, but the best looking councillor to nearly take the mayoralty of Hunters Hill. Thanks for being here, Zach. It's your advocacy also at a personal and professional level for Sydney has been wonderful in the years that I've known you, and I thank you for that. Chris Downey, a former minister in the state government, Minister for Arts and Sport, wasn't it, Chris? Sport and racing. Oh, you shouldn't have said arts. I think the great art of racing is here too, and thanks. Chris and I have had a lot of dealings. Most latterly, we had some pretty good discussions about the merits of the proposed Ritz-Carlton Tower at Piermont above the Star Casino, and unfortunately that's been an idea that's on ice for the moment, but I would like to see resurrected again. There are also a few people in the room who I've mentioned in my author's note. One of my dearest friends, Andrew Hall, is here. Unfortunately, Shane Kruger, his partner, couldn't be because he's off reigniting the New South Wales visitor economy via Airbnb at Bluey's Beach. And another old friend of mine, Sean O'Connor, who started out in Sydney Liberal politics way ahead of me, although he's much younger, and really when I arrived on the scene taught me how to navigate the vagaries of the Sydney conference and was really great at keeping me up on all the gossip. To Max Markson, who on behalf of Michael Wilkinson and Wilkinson Publishing has organised today's event, which thankfully as we emerge from our COVID hibernation has been at least, even at very short notice, able to be a live event as well as an online event. And on behalf of Max and Wilkinson Publishing, I ask please buy the book because I know that they'll be grateful if you do. To my mum, Pete, or Faye as she's otherwise known, who's broken the shackles of isolation to come into the city today, thanks for being the strong woman that you are and for helping me to be the same, I hope. And lastly, of course, to my gorgeous wife, Virginia, who's here. I mention in the book that Virginia is as passionate about Sydney and its people, its significance, its history, its culture and its beauty, its potential as I am. I want to continue to contribute to the future of this great city, but I can only do that with her continued love, goodwill and guidance. And I assume she'll give it, but in advance, I'm thanking her for it.
Keep the applause going for Christine Forster, ladies and gentlemen. Can I also, while we're talking family, also acknowledge Christine's children, Erin, Harriet, James and Matt, and Virginia's children, Laura and Fraser. I might now take the opportunity, if I can, to invite both Tony and Christine up here for a moment, and we're going to have a brief chat. Again, Tony and Christine, come up onto the stage. Who's going to be on the right? You can be on the right. Mr. Abbott, you can be on the left. But based on where they're looking, you're on the right. Now, I'm just going to go a little bit personal here, and I just want to delve into the early days of the Abbott family growing up. Can you give me some understanding of what this guy was like as a child? Because I think we'd all be fascinated to hear about it.
Well, he wasn't a child when I met him because he's 7 years older than me. But he was, he was always the big brother. He's got 3 younger sisters and I was the youngest. One of my earliest vivid memories about Tony, Ben, was getting the hammer thump on the top of the head at regular occasions because I was much shorter than him, when we girls would annoy him. But he was always our big brother. Of course, you looked up to him because he was bigger and he was off doing things before you were and making his way in the world before you were. So it was just natural that you viewed him with some measure of respect, even though we weren't averse to taking the mickey out of him when we felt like it.
Let me ask you the same question. I'm a bit concerned about the hammer thump, but just to explain, was she that badly behaved? Did she deserve it?
Look, I am told, although I've extinguished these memories, that one of my favourite tricks was to bring a plastic sword into bath time and administer summary justice to my sisters with this plastic sword. So look, as I said, I can't remember. These are just family legends as far as I'm concerned. False family legends. Fake news.
The relationship between the two of you, it obviously, during the debate around same-sex marriage, it was something that we all witnessed because we were all sitting back and you were both lead voices on either side of this debate. What was that like behind the scenes? Because for us, we were all consuming the information, but this is your brother we're talking about.
Yeah, look, it was a long and hard campaign. All of my time in public life, the campaign was bubbling along, and of course it reached a crescendo in 2017 when we found ourselves in the plebiscite process. It's a cliche, Ben, but over those years it was a roller coaster ride. It really was, because things would happen and everybody's hopes would be built up that yes, we're going to get a conscience vote in Parliament, or the Irish referendum happened and it's going to happen here. It has to, and then things would then progress and everyone's hopes would be dashed. And to be fair, mostly they were dashed because of things that Tony was doing, but and that made it even more of an emotional roller coaster for me, because obviously our difference of opinion was playing out in public, but we both knew very clearly where we each stood, and we knew that we would be on either sides of the argument, and that was tough. It is, but as I said earlier, we always knew that ultimately our relationship as siblings would withstand whatever was going on in the public and political forum.
When that argument or discussion was happening in the public, did it happen in private? Were there any times where the two of you sat down together, either formally or informally, and had it out?
Of course there were, Ben, and the discussion was respectful. Occasionally it was passionate, but it was certainly very much a live issue. Luckily, it didn't completely muck up Christmas celebrations and things like that. It might just have enlivened a few of them. But look, two points I want to make. The first point I want to make is that I think that this matter was much better settled via the plebiscite than it would have been by a mere parliamentary vote. And I know the supporters of same-sex marriage didn't want that, but I think most of them would now admit that the way it came about was a better way, a healing way, if you like, because those who were on the other side of the argument really have to accept with good grace a decision that wasn't foisted on them by a parliament, a politically correct parliament, but which was a decision made by the whole people who had the chance to reflect on this at their leisure and then cast a judgment on it through that vote. So that's the first point I should make. The second point I should make is that, as far as I am concerned, this matter is now settled. the law of the land says that marriage is between any two people, but churches and others are free to maintain a different position. And I think this is a perfectly satisfactory position for a free and pluralist society to have.
Something I really like about you two is that during the whole debate, I had both of you on the radio giving your different views, and you had very different views. But if someone dared have a crack at the other, you were very quick to jump to each other's defence, and that's a typical brother-sister thing to do. It's one thing for you to bag your brother, but if someone else is going to bag your brother, just to explain where that loyalty lies and how quickly that comes to the fore.
Oh, well, it's absolutely true, Ben. You know, blood is thicker than water, and it transcends political differences of opinions or even disagreement over something as fundamental as marriage. And you're right, I mean, my hackles immediately rise if somebody, and it happens a lot, let me tell you, that people are criticising Tony within my earshot. But you know, you just have to roll with the punches. People in our position, you know, have to have thick skins, and you just have to cop it.
Ben,
Yes.
One of the, I think, unfortunate features of so much of our public discourse these days is that it is not civil. It is not a civil conversation. I think Chris and I were able to maintain a pretty civil dialogue over same-sex marriage, but on so many different issues, and we're seeing it on our streets at the moment, those who disagree are not just misguided and wrong on the issue, but they're bad people, even evil people. And I think this over-moralising, if you like, of our public debates is a real problem. There is not nearly enough acceptance that people of good faith can, in good conscience, disagree with each other.
Just lastly, Christine, when you were marrying Virginia, what was it like looking down in the front row of that ceremony and seeing your brother Tony sitting there?
Well, we kind of deliberately arranged the room so that I faced the Flitcrofts and Virginia faced the Abbotts. So that worked out quite well. But it was fabulous to have Tony, Margie, all of my family there, all of our friends. It was a great day. We had a terrific time. Tony said afterwards, well, it wasn't as traditional as I thought it would be.
Well, there were two women for starters.
But I don't know what he was expecting. But it was terrific. And of course, we've since celebrated our second wedding anniversary, and I hope to celebrate many, many more with Virginia.
A huge congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. Life, love and marriage. Put your hands together for Christine Forster and Tony Abbott. And if you'd like to make your way up the front here and have a book signed by the author and maybe even her brother, thank you very much for joining us today.
Please thank Ben Fordham